This story begins in 1995, when a 20-year-old man named Stephen Pladl met 15-year-old Alyssa Garcia in an online chat room. At that time, Stephen was residing with his mother in New York and was known for being a loner, often wearing the same hockey sweater and being a target for bullies among his former classmates. Alyssa, who was living with her parents in San Antonio, Texas, would later describe Stephen as actively grooming her. After he traveled across the country to meet her, their relationship quickly became physical. Despite her parents' disapproval, they felt unable to intervene, and Stephen convinced Alyssa to run away from home. By the time she was 16, Alyssa was living with Stephen in New York and was pregnant with their first child. It did not take long for Alyssa to experience the darker side of Stephen's personality. He was not only a loner but also volatile, controlling, and violent. Alyssa soon found herself isolated from her family and trapped in a cycle of abuse that she could not escape. The birth of their daughter, whom they named Denise, did nothing to improve the situation. Instead, it exacerbated the already dire circumstances of their relationship. As Alyssa lovingly cared for their new daughter, Stephen showed little interest in her, rarely picking her up, feeding her, changing her. His behavior was even more alarming when the baby cried, as it triggered him into uncontrollable rages. He would pinch the baby until her body was bruised and black, and when she cried, he would cover her mouth with his hand. Alyssa later recalled the desperation she felt, saying, "I would scoop her up, shut the bedroom door, and rock her back and forth, telling her how sorry I was for the life she was having." By the time the baby was 8 months old, Alyssa felt an overwhelming sense of terror due to Stephen's escalating abuse. This led her to make the heart-wrenching decision to put the baby up for adoption. She explained to her family that she was unable to cope due to postpartum depression and felt unready to care for a child. The baby, Denise, was fortunate to be adopted by a loving couple, Anthony and Kelly Fusco, who renamed her Katie Fusco and provided her a new and stable life. Anthony, an officer with the State Department of Corrections, and Kelly, a secretary, raised Katie in a modest and loving home in Dover, a small town about 80 miles north of New York, alongside their own biological daughter. Alyssa, however, continued to suffer deep feelings of regret and loss. Despite her circumstances, she felt increasingly dependent on Stephen and agreed to marry him in 2006, convincing herself that he could change and envisioning a perfect marital home. Instead, life with Stephen only deteriorated further into a house of horrors. 9 years after Denise became Katie Fusco, Alyssa and Stephen welcomed another baby girl, marking the beginning of another chapter in their tumultuous relationship. 5 years after the birth of their second child, the family welcomed a third baby girl, whom they named Raven. Although Stephen was still volatile, he seemed to manage parenthood slightly better at this point. The family had relocated to Henrico, a suburb of Richmond, Virginia, and for Alyssa, it felt as if the family might finally be turning a corner. However, this optimism was short-lived. Stephen's inability to hold down a job forced Alyssa to take on multiple jobs to support the family. His violent outbursts continued, with him throwing furniture and punching holes in the walls. On 2 occasions, he brutally beat a neighborhood cat, killing it the second time and disposing of its body in a garbage bag. He also developed an obsession with firearms, accumulating a significant collection of weapons. The family lived in constant fear, walking on eggshells around Stephen. Despite her best efforts to protect her children, Alyssa's long work hours meant she had to leave them in his care. One incident stood out when she returned home to find a shivering 3-year-old standing in the bath, her legs soaked in urine, as a punishment for not using the toilet on time. Alyssa made several attempts to leave Stephen, but he responded with threats, including promising to record himself blowing his brains out and leaving it for her and the children to find. This left Alyssa feeling trapped. In August 2015, Alyssa received a friend request on social media from her long-lost daughter, Denise, now known as Katie. This unexpected connection felt like a gift from the universe, and Alyssa was overjoyed to learn about her oldest daughter's life. However, this reunion would eventually lead to a series of tragic events. At 17, Katie had been flourishing in a normal and stable home. She was a cheerleader at Dover High School, had a deep love for animals that led her to become a vegetarian, and even took care of stray cats. Katie was also artistic, renowned in school for her impressive comic strips. In her blog, she expressed her passion for art, writing that a pen and something to draw on has become a safe place for me. It has become my weapon against rules and regulations. For me, life without art is no life at all. Katie had ambitious plans for her future. After graduation, she intended to attend a community college before transferring to the State University of New York to study digital advertising. Despite her seemingly perfect life, Katie had long felt a strong desire to discover her biological parents. In the summer of 2015, she began searching for them on Facebook and soon found both Stephen and Alyssa Pladl. To her surprise, she learned that her parents were still together and that she had two biological sisters, aged 11 and 7. The Pladl family appeared to be a happy and loving one, and they responded enthusiastically to Katie's initial message. Soon, Katie and her biological parents were in regular communication, and plans were made for her to visit them in Henrico. The family reunion took place in June 2016, just after Katie's high school graduation, bringing immense joy to Alyssa, who had been marking every one of Katie's birthdays for 18 years. The family spent the day together, capturing moments of their reunion. After taking photos and enjoying an instant and effortless connection, communication between the family members continued even after Katie returned to Dover. However, Katie soon made a shocking announcement. Instead of attending college, she decided to move to Henrico County to live with her birth parents. Tony and Kelly Fusco were both shocked, saddened, and apprehensive, but since Katie was 18, they had little choice but to accept her decision. They might have delved deeper into the reasons behind her sudden change of heart, but they did not. In the months following Katie's arrival, Alyssa noticed a disturbing change in Stephen. The 1-year-old had suddenly become more interested in his appearance, buying new clothes, shaving his beard, and growing his hair out in a style similar to that of boys Katie's age. Alyssa assumed he wanted to look like a cool dad to impress his eldest daughter. But this was just the beginning of many red flags. For 20 years, Stephen had threatened Alyssa if she even thought about leaving him. But now, he was surprisingly agreeable to a separation. Not long after Katie moved in, Stephen and Alyssa began sleeping in separate rooms, and plans for their divorce were underway. Alyssa was too focused on reconnecting with her eldest daughter to question the sudden change in Stephen's behavior. She was excited about the prospect of rekindling their mother-daughter bond. However, within weeks of Katie's arrival, it became clear that Katie's attention was directed elsewhere. While Alyssa worked long hours at T-Mobile, Katie spent all day with her father, and they had formed a close bond. Alyssa started to suspect that Stephen was manipulating Katie against her. About 6 weeks after Katie moved in, Alyssa discovered that Stephen had begun sleeping on Katie's bedroom floor. When she confronted him, he responded aggressively and stormed out of the house. It was puzzling why Alyssa did not immediately realize the gravity of the situation. Nonetheless, she took Katie aside and warned her about Stephen's dark side, sharing the abuse she had suffered at his hands. When Alyssa warned Katie about the abuse she had suffered at Stephen's hands as a baby, to her astonishment, Katie dismissed her concerns. Alyssa was prepared to leave Stephen, having been granted custody of their two younger daughters and expecting Katie to join them. However, she was shocked when Katie chose to stay with her father. Nothing could have prepared Alyssa for the shocking revelation that followed. In May 2017, after her daughters returned from a weekend with Stephen and Katie, Alyssa discovered a disturbing entry in her 11-year-old daughter's journal. The little girl had written about the relationship between Stephen and her sister Katie, expressing confusion and concern. The journal entry read, "Katie is my big sis, and I love her. I also love how she's skinny in areas and has smaller breasts. But how is she pregnant and gained weight? My dad calls her baby, also his baby. Did he make her pregnant? My dad even says that she's my stepmom. WTF. He doesn't even want me to say or call her sister anymore. Katie is my sister. She's probably his wife now, but in nature, she's only my sister. Does she see me as a daughter or a sister? Katie now sometimes tells me to get up." The journal also included drawings of Stephen depicted as Satan, with one drawing showing the little girl running away from him and a note that read, "Wait 1 second. If he's Satan and Katie's human, then the baby will be half demon." This discovery horrified Alyssa, who had long suspected that Stephen was manipulating Katie against her, but had never imagined that he would engage in a sexual relationship with his own daughter. She felt sick and overwhelmed by the realization that Stephen had exposed her other 2 children to this twisted situation. Alyssa recalled becoming hysterical and calling Stephen, asking if Katie was pregnant with his baby. He responded by saying, "I thought you knew. We are in love." Alyssa's reaction was intense. She screamed and cursed him out, saying, "How could you? You're sick. She's a child." She then called the police to report the situation. During the investigation, police questioned Stephen, Katie, and Alyssa's 2 youngest daughters, but no immediate arrests were made. Alyssa hoped the investigation would lead to Stephen's arrest. However, on July 20th, 2017, while the investigation was still ongoing, 43-year-old Stephen married his 20-year-old daughter Katie in a romantic lakeside ceremony in Parkton, Maryland. This marriage was technically illegal, but Stephen had lied on the marriage application, claiming they were not related. Katie, who was already heavily pregnant, wore a fitted black dress at the wedding. The ceremony was attended by Stephen's 72-year-old mother, Grace, and surprisingly, Katie's adoptive parents. Despite the bizarre and disturbing nature of the situation, they were seen smiling in photos alongside their daughter and her biological father, who had seduced and impregnated her and now planned to spend his life with her. The question remains as to why Katie responded to Stephen's initiatives, given that he was her biological father. Incest is a concept that evokes strong revulsion in most people and is considered taboo in nearly every human culture. Historical studies indicate that humans recognized the dangers of inbreeding as far back as 34,000 years ago. Although there are 2 states in America where incest is not entirely prohibited, it remains highly taboo. After evading marriage laws, Stephen and Katie moved to a house in Knightdale, North Carolina, just 20 minutes from his mother's home, and began living openly as husband and wife. On September 1st, 2017, Katie gave birth to their son, Bennett Kieran Pladl, but the family's brief period of happiness was short-lived. In January 2018, Stephen and Katie were arrested and extradited to Henrico County to face charges of incest, with additional charges against Stephen for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Stephen was released a month later on a $28,000 bond, with the condition that he have no contact with Katie. Katie was also bailed out and ordered to return to her adoptive parents in New York. Meanwhile, Stephen's 72-year-old mother, Grace, was given custody of their baby boy, Bennett. The controversial relationship garnered significant media attention. Stephen's lawyer argued that Stephen had never pressured Katie into a relationship. Meanwhile, 20-year-old Katie attempted to settle back into her life at home, taking a job cleaning her grandmother's house in Waterbury, Connecticut, every Tuesday and Thursday. With time away from Stephen, she began to reflect and gain clarity on some of the choices she had made. On April 11, 2018, Katie called Stephen to inform him that she wanted to end the marriage and raise their son Bennett in a healthy environment. However, she underestimated the danger she was dealing with. When Stephen's attempts to change her mind failed, he devised another plan. On Thursday, April 12, 2018, Tony Fusco and his adopted daughter Katie left their Dover home in a black pickup truck to head to Waterbury, where Katie had a job cleaning her grandmother's house. Unbeknownst to them, a man in a nearby Honda minivan was watching them. As they pulled out of the drive, the minivan followed closely behind. At an intersection a few minutes later, the minivan pulled up alongside the truck, and the man opened his window, pulling out an Arrow assault-type rifle and firing into the cabin. Police found the bodies of 56-year-old Tony Fusco and 20-year-old Katie Pladl still strapped in their seats. They had been killed instantly. Soon after, the same minivan was found just over the state border in Dover, New York, with a man dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the front seat. Stephen Pladl. Another 911 call was made by Stephen's mother, Grace Pladl, in Cary, North Carolina, reporting her concerns about her son's actions. Police were promptly dispatched to conduct a welfare check at Stephen Pladl's home in Knightdale, North Carolina. In the closet of an upstairs bedroom, they discovered the lifeless body of a 7-month-old baby boy, who had been suffocated. This tragic event occurred after Stephen got off the phone with Katie on April 11th. Despite being banned by the courts from any contact with Katie, Stephen was allowed to see his son, an oversight that ultimately led to the baby's death. Stephen had called his mother to inform her that he was picking up baby Bennett for a Skype call with Katie. After his mother handed over the baby, Stephen took him home and suffocated the infant with a pillow. He then hid the baby's body in a wardrobe and drove over 600 miles through the night to the home of Tony and Kelly Fusco. Knowing they would be heading to Waterbury that morning, Stephen waited in his van to ambush them. During the drive, Stephen called his mother around 7 a.m. to say he was on his way to visit Katie with the baby and was almost there. An hour and 45 minutes later, at 8:45 a.m., he made his final call to his mother, informing her that he had killed his son Bennett and shot dead both Katie and her father, Tony. The murders sent shockwaves through the community. Katie, Bennett, and Anthony Fusco were laid to rest on April 21st at St. Charles Borromeo Church in Dover Plains, New York. Alyssa sent flowers but chose not to attend, opting to avoid further media attention. The case involving Stephen and Katie Pladl is profoundly tragic and thought-provoking, highlighting the taboo subject of incest and its devastating consequences, which often remain hidden and are rarely discussed in open society.